Imagine a police officer pulls you over. You're on the side of the road. It's late at night. The next thing you see is a flashlight beaming in your window. The officer leans in and says, "Mind if I check your trunk?" What you say next could be the difference between you staying in control or losing access to your car completely. Because here's the reality. Even if you've done nothing wrong, you're sober, you're polite, maybe you were even cooperative, your trunk is still not off limits to the cops unless you know how to legally shut down the search. I'm Jeff Hampton, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to keep cops out of your trunk. No loopholes here, no guessing, and no gotchas. In today's video, I'm going to give you the specific legal strategies to keep your trunk private. And if you wait around to the end, I'll break down specifically how to store your valuables in your trunk to keep cops out, even if they somehow make it into your trunk. So let's start off with the basics. There are 4 main ways police officers can legally search your trunk without a warrant. We must make sure we understand these 4 specific exceptions to a warrant requirement in order to shut down police when they try to search your trunk. Number 1, probable cause under the automobile exception. This means if an officer has reason to believe, probable cause, to believe there's evidence of a crime in your car, they can search your entire car, including your trunk, without a warrant. This automobile exception originated from United States versus Carroll way back in 1925. And basically the Supreme Court ruled that because automobiles are mobile, if cops had to wait to go get a warrant, it would be too easy for that person in the car to drive away. So it created this kind of exigency, this emergency situation where cops could search someone's car and they didn't have to necessarily have a warrant. The U.S. Supreme Court later confirmed that probable cause is enough by itself for officers to search areas of the car where an object could be concealed during the search. For example, in U.S. versus Ross, the court said that if probable cause justifies a search, quote, it extends to every part of the vehicle and its contents that may conceal the object of the search, including a trunk and its containers. In practice, this means under federal law, if an officer sees anything in your car, let's say they walk up in plain view, and they think it may be indicative of a crime, some evidence of a crime, they can now search your trunk on the spot. But, and this is a big but, that belief must be based upon articulable facts, not just a hunch, not a vibe, not a guess. So if the cop looks at you and says, "I think I smell something," or "your eyes look red," here's what you do. As you record the encounter, it would be important to say, "Officer, are you claiming there may be probable cause here? Is the probable cause you're concerned about related to my trunk? And I do not consent to a search of my trunk unless you can help me understand what specific evidence you are claiming right now that's tied to my trunk." The officer must articulate this word for word. We don't want to trust the police report here. That's created later after the fact. The officers sit down and they articulate what they want to articulate. But if you're recording everything at this time and you're somewhat forcing the officer here to articulate what that probable cause is, it can be used against that officer and be used to make sure your rights are not being violated. Number 2, consent. This is one cops try to slip in casually. "Hey, mind if I take a quick look?" And of course, you've done nothing wrong. So you say, "Sure, I've got nothing to hide." And just like that, they're in your trunk. No probable cause needed, no warrant required because you gave up the farm. A driver's consent is the most simple way that cops get into people's trunks to search without a warrant. As a general rule under the 4th Amendment, if you freely and voluntarily consent to a search, no probable cause is needed, no warrant is required. Under the Supreme Court case of Schnittcloth versus Bustamante, consent to the officer makes the entire search of everything in your car, and I mean even the stuff they pull out. They may literally take out your seats and leave them on the roadside and search and pull out under the cover and the carpet and other areas of your vehicle. Now that all becomes perfectly legal, and that's what the court actually said, quote, perfectly legal, because you consented to it. So always be on the lookout for the police leading questions, because it always leads to you waiving your 4th Amendment rights. Never forget, you do not have to consent. You should memorize this line anytime you get into an altercation with a police officer. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Say it calmly, clearly, twice if you need to. This one phrase protects you more than almost anything else. Without consent, the officer must now try to hunt for probable cause. or try to arrest you for something minor to have search incident to arrest. Speaking of which, number 3 is search incident to arrest. Here's what that means. Under New York versus Belton, if you're being arrested, the police can search any of the area within your car that you had access to, like within your wingspan, within your immediate reach, or any area of the car where evidence could be concealed that was the subject of your arrest. So in other words, it must be related to why they were arresting you, and they can search either within the wingspan of where you are at, where you have access to, or an area where you might be able to conceal any evidence. However, the Supreme Court case later in 2009 of Arizona versus Gant put some limitations on this. Now, a warrantless search incident to arrest of a vehicle is permitted only if the arrestee is unsecured and within reaching distance of the car, or if it is, quote, reasonable to believe the vehicle contains evidence of the offense of arrest. In most routine traffic stops, you're the driver. What is the one thing that's not within your reach? Your trunk. So now police cannot automatically search a trunk incident to every arrest. Now, it might be a different story if someone's being arrested for a burglary or for drugs, and they have reason to suspect that evidence of that crime might be in the trunk. But even then, Gant said that the trunk usually is outside the scope of what that search would allow because it is not a part of a passenger compartment. In other words, after an arrest, a cop is going to need some new probable cause or your consent to justify getting into your trunk without a search warrant. So unless cops can explain to you how your trunk specifically has potentially evidence related to what they're arresting you for right now, they can't just open it up. Your move here, it's very simple. You say, and I quote, "I do not consent to any searches. My trunk is not within reach and unrelated to the reason for my arrest." Number 4, inventory searches. Let's say the police arrested someone for a ticky-tack traffic violation. Now, if they have a policy in place, they are allowed to impound the vehicle and do what's called an inventory of the contents of the vehicle, including in the area of the trunk. Cops don't need a warrant in order to perform this inventory, but they must have a specific written inventory policy and they must follow it to the letter. Why is this allowed? Well, the Supreme Court has said this is technically not an investigative search. It's just an administrative search. And police officers should be allowed to inventory all the items within the car so that the owner can't come back later and claim someone stole any items, and so the police can protect themselves from some sort of claim of theft or any impropriety. The loophole for cops: if they stumble upon any evidence during the inventory, they can use it now against you. But wait, there are definitely limitations. The impoundment of the vehicle must be lawful. It must be legal. So if the cops use this as a pretext just to claim you did something wrong in order to inventory your search, it's thrown out. And that inventory search must be done in good faith. For example, in Iowa, the Iowa Supreme Court found that their officers were routinely impounding vehicles for minor traffic violations only as a fishing expedition to look for other evidence. As a result of this, Iowa now requires a warrant to search a car in many scenarios. Under federal law, though, as long as the inventory wasn't a joke or a sham, this is still permitted to take place. So one of the best ways to protect yourself in this situation, if an officer wants to try to literally arrest you for some ticky-tack traffic violation, the best way to do it is to ask and be able to turn over the custody of the car to someone else who is a licensed driver. This helps to avoid impoundment because many police departments have a policy as part of their policy that if there is another driver that the car can be released to in custody, then according to their own policies, they cannot now search your car as part of an inventory search. Remember, officers must follow their department policy or anything they're doing here is illegal. Remember, cops can't just use an illegal impounding of your vehicle as a back door to your trunk. So if an officer tries to pull this on you, what you'll say is, "Officer, I'm actually going to release the custody of my vehicle to this licensed driver," and then have that licensed driver, if they're a passenger or if someone is close by, you can show proof that they're able and willing to be able to drive that vehicle and stop it dead in its tracks. What if cops decide to tow your car anyway and do an inventory search? Simply say this: "I do not waive my rights. I expect this inventory search to follow official department policy." That one line helps create legal accountability. So we just covered the 4 legal ways cops try to search your trunk, but what are the biggest mistakes that get your trunk searched? It's so important to know what not to do because most people lose their rights not because of some police aggression, but because they just gave in to what cops were trying to trick them into doing. Mistake number 1, being way too casual. We covered this a little bit already, but the moment you are tempted to say, sure, I've got nothing to hide, the cop can now, knowing that you've waived your Fourth Amendment rights, not only dig into your trunk, but here's the problem. They could tear up your trunk. They could throw all your belongings on the side of the road. They could also now start searching inside your car, and you could be sitting there for hours, pulling out your seats, the insides of your doors, all of it because now you've given complete consent. Mistake number 2, volunteering too much information. Please don't engage with small talk with officers. Think of that small talk as little hooks that cops are throwing out, trying to bait you in to what they want. For example, cops may routinely ask questions like, hey, mind if I take a look in your trunk? What you got back there? I know you're an honest person. I'm sure you're not doing anything wrong. Just give me a quick second. I'll be in and out. Never list the items that are in your trunk. Don't tell them what's in your trunk or give any justifications. If you say, no, I've just got tools and a gym bag back there, cops can now interpret that however they want. You may have now just given them justification to search your trunk. Even if what you were going to say is harmless, even if it's just simply the truth, repeat after me. Officer, I don't consent to searches, and am I free to go? Because here's the problem. If you start saying things like, well, officer, there's nothing illegal back there. I've just got a few things back there, maybe my gym bag, I don't know, maybe some old books back there that I've had from school, or just you start naming things like that. Officer is now going to take your nervousness and your uncertainty in your words and try to claim that now establishes some evidence to make him suspicious that you're hiding something back there. And that's the doorway. That's the key to unlock the door to get into your trunk. How do we really know if the news we are reading is unbiased and fair? With competing narratives, media bias, and big tech censorship, cutting through the noise to see what's really happening isn't always easy. Luckily, there is a solution. Ground News gives you the freedom to discover whether what you are reading is unbiased and fair so that you can come to your own conclusions. Isn't that what the news is supposed to be about? Check them out for yourself at ground.news/Hampton. Let's take the recent decision by the U.S. Department of Justice to abandon police reform settlements with Minneapolis and Louisville. Agreements that were initiated after the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. As we analyze the coverage, the top right displays key details: the number of sources reporting, their political bias distribution, reliability ratings, and ownership information. These insights help reveal how different outlets are shaping the narrative. One of the most powerful features of Ground News is the headline comparison. Here we can see for ourselves how stories are being framed by different news outlets. By clicking on the left, center, and right, we can observe the language and tone used, allowing us to draw our own conclusions. For instance, a left-leaning headline might focus on civil rights implications, while a right-leaning headline might emphasize federal overreach concerns. My favorite feature, though, is the blind spot feed. With Blind Spot, you can see news stories that are being disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. In our polarized environment, I have found this feature to be an amazing resource to discover news stories that I might have missed otherwise because only one side was talking about it. It's perfect for better understanding friends and family who think differently. The best part? Ground News has a special offer for all of my viewers. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, the same plan I use to get unlimited access to all their features. Go to ground.news/Hampton to give it a try yourself. Click the link down in the description or scan the QR code to stay better informed and transform the way you read. Mistake number 3, getting defensive and aggressive with the cops. Look, I get it. You're frustrated. You're scared, especially if you've done nothing wrong and the cops are being aggressive with you. But remember, their aggression might actually be bait. They might be looking to be aggressive with you, hoping you'll get defensive with them. The moment you get defensive and you start getting frustrated, or maybe you make a quick move or you raise your voice, the officer will now say, whoa, I'm now in fear for my officer's safety. Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, the Supreme Court says I can now get you out of this vehicle, and I'm going to do a pat-down search of you because I'm a little concerned that you might be hiding a weapon in here. Maybe you have a weapon on you, and that may give them exactly what they needed in order to start searching, which ultimately might mean they get into your trunk. Instead, stay calm, refuse consent, and record the entire interaction. Okay, so we know what mistakes not to make, but now I'm going to walk you through some specific state laws that give you more privacy, more rights than you get under the federal Constitution. If you live in one of these states, you've got extra ammo, extra privacy, and rights that you can stand up against the police during this encounter. Number 1, New Jersey. In New Jersey, cops need both probable cause and an emergency to justify searching your trunk without a warrant. That means if the cops really pulled you over, not because of a traffic violation, but because they wanted to search your trunk anyway, they should have already had a warrant. In fact, the New Jersey Supreme Court held in both State versus Witt and State versus Smart that, quote, probable cause alone is not enough for a warrantless car search under state law. Officers also need unforeseeable and spontaneous circumstances. In plain English, unless an officer pulls you over unexpectedly and develops probable cause, some evidence of a crime right there on the spot, they must obtain a warrant, a valid search warrant, before they can ever search your trunk in New Jersey. In fact, in New Jersey, even if cops think they have probable cause to something in your trunk, they are supposed to first secure the scene and get either an electronic or a telephonic warrant before they actually get inside. Here's what you say if an officer approaches you in New Jersey. Officer, under New Jersey law, a warrant is required to search my trunk unless there's an emergency. I do not consent to a search of my trunk. What about Pennsylvania? Same thing here. Cops need more than probable cause. They need probable cause plus an emergency. So if there's no immediate danger, like a fleeing suspect or something in the trunk about to explode, then they can take the time to go get a warrant before they just start digging in your trunk. So in Pennsylvania, we say something very similar. Officer, I understand that Pennsylvania requires a warrant in order to search my trunk unless there's an emergency. So as a result, I do not consent to a search of my trunk. Now, here's a key thing to do in both of these states. As soon as the whole purpose of the traffic stop is resolved, you want to look over at that officer and you want to say, Officer, am I free to leave? Because you are now creating a barrier. If he pulled you over only for a traffic violation and now they're trying to get into your trunk, they're going to have a hard time doing this now because saying you are free to leave helps stop the officer from claiming later that you were consenting to any of these searches. Another great strategy here is to lock your trunk and keep the key secure on your person. Don't have it sitting out or available for an officer to reach in and grab. An officer in New Jersey or Pennsylvania facing a locked trunk, a non-consenting driver, and the demand now of having to go get an actual warrant signed by a judge, sometimes they'll decide, this is not worth it. I'm just going to cut them loose and not keep you on the side of the road. Number 3, I'm going to give you a list of other states that have similar protections to both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. States like Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, Montana, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Most of these states reject or restrict the automobile exception explicitly within their constitution. Which means what? A driver in these states can explicitly quote the constitutional provision as a basis for why the officer cannot actually search their trunk. For example, if you're in New Mexico, you can politely tell the officer, quote, Officer, I do not consent to any search. As you know, under Article 2, Section 10 of the New Mexico Constitution, you are required to have a warrant to search my trunk unless there's an emergency. I do not consent. If an officer insists they have cause to search your trunk, you can also ask in one of these states, Officer, is there an exigent circumstance? If not, I'll wait for your warrant. You might say, Jeff, wait a minute. I don't want to wait on the side of the road and wait for them to get a warrant or to challenge them to get a warrant. Well, the benefit of doing what I just shared with you is actually twofold. Number 1, it could make the officer double check with a supervisor or think twice about proceeding forward when he may not really have any evidence here. And I've seen this happen before when someone really knows their rights. And number 2, if you're running your camera here, which you should record everything with the police, and obviously if the cop has his body camera on, it also records the fact you did not consent to any of this. And you clearly stated your constitutional provision, your state law that provides extra federal protection where the officer must follow these protocols. And strategically, if the cop does go and get a warrant anyway, now a judge had to review this so-called evidence the cop is relying on, and it gives some judicial oversight and gives you an opportunity to challenge that supposed warrant if the cops proceed forward. Strategically, you can keep your trunk locked, don't hand over your keys unless required, and remember, You can always state your state's constitutional protection on any of these states that we're talking about as a way to potentially stop the cops. Now, before I break down some real world scenarios where all of this applies, I'm going to give you some landmark cases you need to know. U.S. versus Ross from 1982. This case says that if there's probable cause that there is crime, evidence of a crime in your car, that search can extend to your trunk. But only if the evidence that cops are looking for can reasonably be tied to the trunk. Which is exactly why it's so important that if the cop claims they have probable cause, they have to tie that probable cause to your trunk. We've already covered also Arizona versus Gant, which thankfully it limits searches incident to an arrest. Unless the person being arrested can reach the area of the car or the trunk involved, the cops can't go just keep digging. They've got to get a separate warrant. Finally, this brings us to Florida versus Wells. This case is extremely important because it outlines if cops want to use that inventory search trick we talked about earlier, they must have a written, documented policy, and they must follow that written, documented policy to a letter. So it's always good to ask, officer, if you're about to tow my vehicle, do you have a written department policy? Does that department policy provide I'm going to be able to release this vehicle to another licensed driver? If so, you are hamstringing that officer. He must now release your vehicle to that other person, that licensed driver. If he tries to persist in towing your vehicle and searching your vehicle under an inventory search, it's completely illegal. That now brings us to some real world scenarios. I've seen an officer pull over a rental car one time, walk up to the front door to the driver and say, rental cars are often used for drug trafficking. The driver then says, officer, that's not specific to me. I don't consent to any searches. Am I free to leave? What about chatty passengers in your car? The officer walks up to your driver's window and your chatty passenger looks over and says, officer, you can go ahead and check the trunk. There's nothing in there. We haven't done anything wrong. You can then stop the officer and say, officer, this vehicle is not owned by this passenger, and this passenger has no authority to give consent for my vehicle. I do not consent to any search and will not open the trunk. Another real world scenario, the officer sees you have access to the trunk from the back seat. They see a fold down seat. If the officer demands to be able to get access through the inside of your car into your trunk, you can simply say, officer, that is a distinct compartment under the law. I do not consent to a search of that area. What if the cops then, trying to get into your trunk, arrest you for something ticky-tack, like a speeding ticket or a suspended license? The way to stop cops here from getting into your trunk is to say, officer, there's no evidence of my speeding or a suspended license in the trunk. I do not consent. And finally, the old tried and true officer walking up and saying they claim they smell marijuana. Now, I just did a video about this recently talking about the nuances between the smell of fresh or burnt marijuana. But if an officer walks up and does this, here's one of the clearest things that you can do to show there's no way this officer is able to tie what he's claiming he's smelling to your trunk to get in your trunk. One of the things you can say is you can say, and I quote, are you claiming the odor is coming specifically from the trunk, officer? Make them explain it. The officer on camera being forced to explain and articulate the specific articulable facts here must be done at that moment. Otherwise, the officers will put it all together and they'll make it sound right on their police report after they've already substantiated it. Finally, and here's the best part, I'm going to give you the specific strategic steps you can take right now to stop cops from getting in your trunk. Number one, use valet mode. Disable the interior access into your trunk. Set it this way because what I find officers do is they will then get into the inside of your car and they'll just flick the trunk. They'll find it and act like they accidentally opened it, and the next thing you know, they're in your trunk. Number two, if you live in one of these states that has stronger protections than under the federal constitution, stand on that specific protection. Quote it. Let the officer know that as you're being confronted by this, and make sure you actually lock the trunk so the officer does not have access to it. Keep those keys in your possession, and record everything to stop them. Oh, and by the way, always reassert multiple times that you are adamant you do not consent to a search. Number three, and this is a big one, store your valuables in a locked box inside your trunk. This is really important. There's case law both in New Mexico and multiple other states where if you have a locked box inside your trunk, even if the cops somehow got into your trunk, they're going to have separate Completely separate probable cause to somehow try to force open a locked container. Number 4, and this might sound obvious, but you would be shocked at some people who do this, never keep your proof of registration or any of your items you have to show the police in your trunk. Otherwise, this requires you to get access to your trunk, which then allows the officer to get access to your trunk. Number 5, stay calm, even breathing. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. No sudden movements. Don't elevate or don't escalate the encounter, because remember, cops are always looking for some reason to justify that their officer's safety is at risk so they can get you out of the car and search everything. And finally, please always record everything. Never assume that the police officer's body camera is working, both audio or video. In fact, you should assume it's never working. Whether it's your dash cam or if it's your phone, whatever you have, record it. And it's so important to do this because even if the officer gives you a hard time about this, remember you have a First Amendment right to record this police interaction, and it is not interfering with this officer's duties for you to be able to record his interactions with you. So you don't need to be a lawyer to protect your rights. You just need to know the right words, the right phrases, the right moves here, and the right tone. Because once that trunk opens and the cops get inside, it's all fair game for them to use whatever they want against you. Remember your script here. I do not consent to any searches. What is your legal basis for this search? Is this following department policy? Protect your privacy, protect your rights, and protect the privacy of your trunk. Now, we just covered how to protect yourself and stop cops if they want to search your trunk. But what if instead of searching their trunk, they now walk up to your window on a traffic stop and they ask if you're carrying? Now they want to search you, your car, and your property for a firearm. What exactly can you do to protect yourself here? Check out this next video where I break down for you how to stop cops from checking your gun during a traffic stop. See you over there.